come back and talk about trending issues and also the burning issues of the day. Well, uh, that's the reason why I am now live, Manny Lumba TV live. I was watching this uh, committee meeting with respect to the uh, security threat facing America and the world today, and the other offices, agencies, and instrumentalities of government uh, are represented in this meeting. And just listening to the introduction of the chairman and the vice chairman. Vice chairman is Rubio. Uh, my interest was caught because of their statements that riveted me. I couldn't even go to the bathroom. I didn't want to miss anything. So I want to share this uh, committee hearing uh, with everybody. It will benefit whoever is watching. Let's say um, the Philippines, even ASEAN, even Australia, Canada, uh, but Japan, South Korea, even NATO, right? And let's listen to in depth impressions and knowledge, as well as a profound analysis of the people involved, such as the chairman and the vice chairman of this panel. All right, so uh, I'll get there in a short while. Here, here you are. Here, where the FBI, CIA, uh, DNI directors are testifying. Okay, so without further ado, here it is. Wait, uh, I'll start from the beginning. Okay, so I'll rewind a bit.
Ubiquitous surveillance. Artificial intelligence can accelerate software development, but can also accelerate malicious cyber attacks or the spread of misinformation. Biotechnology advancements may lead one day to curing cancer or eliminating famine, but also may create new pathogens, or even, as some have warned, genetically engineered super soldiers. And access to rare earth minerals may help determine who shapes the energy future for the whole world. Compounding all of this, the nature of conflict increasingly allows adversaries to project power through asymmetrical means. For example, cyber attacks can disable critical infrastructure from thousands of miles away and are increasingly available to a widening array of actors. Inexpensive, unmanned systems, drones, can threaten multi-billion-dollar ships. We are now even seeing the possibility of foreign adversaries weaponizing space in ways that could be massively destructive, not only to our national security, but to our way of life and useful tools such as GPS and satellite communications. Similarly, misinformation and disinformation are increasingly deployed cheaply by an array of adversarial actors. More than 60 countries, over half the world's population, will vote this year. And I am deeply concerned that democracy, including in the United States, is under greater threat than ever from these foreign adversaries. Bad actors like Russia are particularly incentivized to interfere given what's at stake in Ukraine. Poll after poll increasingly demonstrate that Americans are distrustful of traditional sources of information. And while AI provides the tools to spread sophisticated misinformation at an unprecedented speed and scale, amidst these threats, our ability to respond has been hamstrung, as recent litigation pending before the Supreme Court has had a chilling effect on the voluntary sharing of information related to foreign malign influence threats between U.S. government agencies and social media companies. So today, I would like each of our witnesses to report on how their agencies and the IC as a whole are prepared and poised to meet these technology-based challenges, and what more needs to be done. Yet, even with this new landscape, more traditional national security challenges remain. Terrorist groups still threaten our homeland. Over the last couple of years, we've seen authoritarian powers challenging democratic norms, undermining the international order, and intimidating their neighbors. The People's Republic of China, under Xi Jinping, has presented an unprecedented challenge, a techno-authoritarian behemoth whose economy is intertwined with our own, challenging democratic values, U.S. leadership, and global institutions. Often using enormous government subsidies, China has used its substantial investment power to lead or attempt to dominate a range of key industries, whether it be telecommunications and Huawei, social media and TikTok, or genomics and BGI. Another authoritarian adversary, Russia, under Putin, has continued its brutal invasion of Ukraine, illegally using military forces to seize territory. Ukrainians have bravely been fending off the Russian military for over 2 years, supported by partners around the world. The Russian military has suffered severe losses of men and equipment, a fact that close to 87% of Russia's pre-war ground forces have been taken out of the conflict by either being killed or wounded. And now, as a result of his aggression, Putin faces what he has always feared, a NATO more united than ever. That said, this war is in a critical phase, with a serious imbalance of equipment, and my fear is the decision thus far by the House of Representatives not to even take up legislation that would support Ukraine in their fight against Putin aggression has been one of the most short-sighted decisions on a national security issue that I can possibly imagine. Without this assistance, Ukrainian defenses will be disastrously undermined, as well as global confidence in America's resolve will be undermined. And that will be the case whether it comes from Putin in Europe or the PRC in Taiwan. And as we convene this hearing, we also face continued instability in the Middle East. The horrific terrorist attacks against Israel civilians by Hamas on October 7th have been followed by an incursion by Israel that has cost an estimated 30,000 Palestinians their lives. And while Iran and its key partners, such as Hezbollah, appeared to be deterred from widening the conflict for now, other Iranian proxies, such as the Houthis in Yemen and Iraqi Shia militias, have attempted to expand their conflict and drag in our country. At the same time, Israel's war against Hamas has shown the difficulty of using military force alone to eradicate a non-state actor embedded in a civilian population, especially one that has been so adept at using underground tunnels. And I worry that Prime Minister Netanyahu's conduct in the war threatens to undermine support for Israel in the long term, including the United States. This international support has been key to Israel's security. And as a longtime friend of Israel, this has a great concern to me for even Israel's support in the United States. In addition, we convene this timely hearing as Congress faces a pressing deadline on a key national security program. Section 702 of the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Act provides unique and critical foreign intelligence necessary to protect our national security enabling the IC to prevent and thwart terrorist attacks, track foreign spies, uncover economic espionage, protect U.S. troops, expose human and drug trafficking, and disrupt foreign cyber attacks. Allowing this program to lapse would critically damage our national security. In closing, we face an increasing array of diversity of challenges, but we also have an opportunity to reinvigorate America's democratic values in face of autocracies like China and Russia. We cannot take for granted either democracy or the international system that has kept Americans safe for decades. Maintaining both requires leadership, conviction, and sacrifice. With that, let me now turn to the Vice Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you all for coming here today. And I also extend my thanks to the men and women who work underneath you that do the important work of keeping our country safe at what I think you could describe as one of those pivot moments in history where what life will be like for a generation is being determined by what's happening now and in the near future, while events are changing perhaps faster than any other time in human history. I think it's hard. I think we have to remind ourselves if we're going to talk about the specific threats, the what's, of the why, the bigger outline picture of why things are happening the way they are happening, because I do think that they are all interrelated. So from the end of the Cold War, I don't know when the end date is, but let's say the late 2000s, we lived in a unipolar world. The United States was basically the only country in the world that could project power everywhere at every time, and we were called upon to do many things in regards to that. But other nation states progressed during that stage, and I still think America, by far, by every measure you can imagine, economically, culturally, militarily, remains the world's strongest nation and should remain that way for the foreseeable future if we make the right choices. That order that I just described is being challenged. It's being challenged by nation states that, frankly, don't like the way the world looks now. At least they think it benefits America and it hurts them, and they want to remake a new world, perhaps even replace the world that they think is beneficial to America and our democratic allies, with an alternative, if not at least a replacement, this new order that they seek. The Chinese, they believe we're in inevitable decline and that their rise is inevitable as well. Like I said, they don't like the rules of the world as they believe were written by America and our allies, and so they increasingly are taking it upon themselves at every opportunity to challenge them. They, at every domain, they steal our ideas on innovation and so forth so that their companies can do the things that we do, but of course do it cheaper and flood markets with those products. I don't need to tell this panel or the members of this committee and the general public that they're expanding their military capabilities in an extraordinary way to include not simply projecting power in the Indo-Pacific, but around the world. They, by the way, they manipulate loopholes in our laws and in our systems in this country to buy up land, buy up companies, gain strategic advantage in industries, and undermine our industries in return. They are a major part of flooding this country with deadly drugs that are destroying communities and ravaging entire families. And they've also gotten very good at hiring lobbyists and even deputizing corporate industry, corporate America, to come up here and lobby us for things that are beneficial to the Chinese goals at the expense of this country long term. And I think it's important to mention here today, they also happen to control. Anybody says they don't, doesn't know what they're talking about, because every company in China is controlled by the Chinese Communist Party. They happen to control a company that owns the world's, one of the world's best artificial intelligence algorithms. It's the one that's used in this country by TikTok. And it uses the data of Americans to basically read your mind and predict what videos you want to see. The reason why TikTok is so successful, the reason why it's so attractive, is because it knows you better than you know yourself. And the more you use it, the more it learns. The problem is not TikTok or the videos. The problem is the algorithm that powers it is controlled by a company in China that must do whatever the Chinese Communist Party tells them to do. And the only way that that algorithm works is if that company in China, under the control of the Chinese government, is given access to the data that TikTok collects. TikTok does not work without that algorithm. And that algorithm is controlled by a company that's controlled by the Chinese Communist Party under the law of China. In the case of Putin, he actually sees America as decadent and in decline, and he views Russia as resilient. They view themselves as a great power, and he believes that great powers have a right to buffer states. He believes that great powers have a right not just to have their own borders, but to control the countries around their borders as buffer states. I think they already have that in Belarus in his mind, and it is one of the reasons why he invades Ukraine. In the case of Iran, they want to export their Shia Islamic revolution to the entire Middle East. And the problem with this is two things standing in their way: the state of Israel and the United States of America. And so that is why they have proxy groups in places like Syria, in Iraq, in Lebanon, in Yemen, in Gaza, who they use for their purposes. One of their purposes is to use these groups now to attack Americans so that we will say it's not worth the trouble, we need to get out of there. And once we leave, then they'll move on Jordan and on Bahrain. Then they'll make Israel an unlivable place. And ultimately, their ambitions are the entire region and most of the Gulf kingdoms. That's why I think it's a mistake to view the horrific events of October 7th as simply the latest iteration of a long-standing Israeli-Palestinian problem. It is deeply tied to the head of this snake, and the head of this snake is in Iran and in Tehran. Add to all of these three countries North Korea. We haven't heard a lot about it yet, but they have become increasingly aggressive. In fact, I would argue that we perhaps are closer to some armed hostilities than we've been in a decade or longer. Why? Why have they become so aggressive? They feel empowered. They feel empowered because Putin is buying things from them and helping them to break their international isolation, and also because I don't know what percentage of their economy is powered by ransomware attacks and cyber hacking, but it's substantial. They generate a lot of money from that. And then add to all these parades of horribles the fact that terror is still a threat. Iran, as has been publicly reported, is still trying to kill former government officials that live in the United States of America. There are former government officials in this country, no longer in office, who require 24 hours a day security because Iran is trying to kill them inside the United States. Hezbollah, an agent of Iran, is also looking for ways to conduct terrorist attacks against American interests and Israeli and Jewish interests all over the world and here in the homeland as well. By the way, ISIS and Al-Qaeda are not out of business. They are still involved at Al-Shabaab to that. They also want to kill Americans. If they could do it in the homeland, they would love that. And all of that happening at a time in which perhaps the single largest, most eventful migration corridor in history is operating right off of our border. So I think it's a mistake sometimes to divide all of these problems geographically, because in some ways, they're all interrelated in key ways. Yes, these individual states all have different ambitions, but they share a common goal. And the common goal is a world friendlier and better for them and their interests, and a world in which America is weakened and less able to act. And all of these crises begin to interlock in a way that help them. For example, the Chinese and the Russians are probably see great benefit. No, not probably. They do see great benefit what's happening in the Middle East, because they figure every dollar and every second of our attention that's paid there is we're not paying to what's happening with Ukraine, and we're not paying to the Indo-Pacific. The Chinese see great benefit in Ukraine as well, because they view it as the more time and money we spend there, the less time and money and focus we have on them. In fact, one of the things I know the Chinese hope for is one of two things. A, we deplete ourselves in Ukraine or the Middle East, particularly Ukraine. Or B, we cut and run, and then they can go around the world, see, I told you America's weak. I told you America's unreliable. They have a plan for either outcome, which makes it challenging for us as we decide what to do here. So these things all come together, and I think that's really the overarching threats that we face, is an understanding that none of these should be viewed in isolation. The goals that Russia has, the goal that Iran has, the goal that North Korea has, the role that the Chinese have, may be different goals. But one of the real developments that threaten the security of our country is that they are increasingly partnering with one another. Not a NATO alliance, not the sort of formal alliance that's written out, but they are increasingly partnering with each other on selected topics and at selected opportunities, because they all share one goal, and that is they want to weaken America, weaken our alliances, weaken our standing and our capability and our will, because it helps them to achieve the world as they envision it, the world that they want. But it comes at our expense and at the expense of all that's been built over the last 20 or 30 years. So I think that one of the greatest dangers we face is the inability to see how all these things are interconnected. And I think one of the greatest challenges we face is to deal with them as if they are interconnected. I think that what life will be like on this planet for the next generation will be determined very much by what we do or fail to do here over the next 2 to 3 years, and certainly with the issues that are before us today. So I look forward to hearing from all of you, and I appreciate you coming.
Thank you, Senator Rubio. I think Director Haynes, I believe you're up first.
Thank you very much. Chairman Warner, Vice Chairman Rubio, members of the committee, thank you so much for the opportunity to be here today alongside my wonderful colleagues to present the IC's annual threat assessment. And before I start, I also want to thank publicly the people of the intelligence community, from the collector to the analyst and everybody in between. We're really presenting the result of their labor at this hearing. And they work tirelessly every day to keep our country safe and prosperous, and we are all very proud to represent them here today. I also want to take the opportunity to thank all of you for the extraordinary support that you've shown to the intelligence community. The IC's relationship with its oversight committees is quite obviously critically important, and you all work with us on a bipartisan basis, and that is especially inspiring in today's environment. We're grateful for your encouragement and for your wisdom. Today, the United States faces an increasingly complex and interconnected threat, as has been noted by the chairman and vice chairman, environment characterized by really 3 categories of challenges. The first is an accelerating strategic competition with major authoritarian powers that are actively working to undermine the rules-based order and the open international system the United States and our partners rely on for trade, commerce, the free flow of information, and accountability to the truth. The second category.
Just, I recognize people feel passionately that the American people deserve to hear from the leaders of the intelligence community. Director Haynes, continue.
Okay. The second category is a set of more intense and unpredictable transnational challenges, such as climate change, corruption, narcotics trafficking, health security, terrorism, and cybercrime that often interact with traditional state-based political, economic, and security challenges. And the third category is regional and localized conflicts that have far-reaching and at times cascading implications, not only for neighboring countries, but also for the world. And all 3 challenges are affected by trends in new and emerging technologies, environmental changes, and economic strain that are stoking instability and making it that much more challenging for us to forecast developments and their implications. These dynamics are putting unprecedented burdens on the institutions and the relationships that the United States relies on to manage such challenges, and perhaps more than ever, frankly, highlight the need for sustained U.S. leadership to uphold the rules-based order. And I'll just touch on these 3 categories of challenges, starting with strategic competition in China, in an effort to provide some context and highlight some of the intersections. President Xi can.
Did you see that? All 3 speakers scanned the intelligence scenario around the world, and they would spot and identify one event or one location, such as Iran or Iraq or Yemen, Syria, Lebanon, Jordan, something like that, or China, or North Korea, or Russia, or Ukraine, even Israel. And then they don't leave it at that. While identifying them as single locations with peculiar problems unto their own, they didn't leave it at that, because what they did was they connected the dots, and in such a way that they're able to thread them into a fabric of a wider scenario, which portrays certain nations slowly but surely, and now at an increasing pace, getting together, collaborating with one another in an effort, number one, to challenge continue challenging America in the West. Number two, to intimidate America. Yes. Number three, to show to the world that America is not reliable. And then they wage war in certain theaters of war. And in so doing, the principals are just supplying weapon systems and ammunition, but they themselves are not in direct warfare, so that their proxies are the ones who are targeted by America and by the West. Thus, what happens is, according to Rubio, uh, depleting the resources, the economic, the financial, and the military resources of America, such as in Ukraine or in Syria, Lebanon, Yemen. Yes, and they do. If they pour in their help and they offer some resistance, they send out battleships and some jets into the area. That is a use of resources, which otherwise, if stored, could be used for future, more wide scale warfare. Yes, you got it. Now, the lessons they're talking about and the issues they identified are not that peculiar to America. You notice what they say about the Chinese? They say the Chinese have certain fronts, yes, and they even weaponize certain uh, companies to represent them and uh, do some lobbying for the strategic interest of China inside America. Yes. So there are parties fighting for China within America. And that's an essential point. It is not strange, therefore, to see that that very thing could be at work in the Philippines as well as in other parts of the world. But in the Philippines, can you imagine if they are, if, and I believe they could uh, harness certain companies and individuals, including influential military, on the strength of the power of the Chinese economy. That means they can fund and support financially the actions of certain individuals pursuing the strategic interests of China. And if these individuals being bankrolled by China are really securing the strategic interests of China, it means they are not securing the strategic interest of the Philippines. Correct? Because those two things collide. They are not one and the same. Correct? And if you say, why do you keep using the word if? Because it's not only a possibility nor a probability. It's like you know that you know that you know that these things are happening in the Philippines. Just look at the more recent YouTube uh, bloggers' statements, and they infer that certain generals are in fact sympathizers of China. And you know that even within Congress, obvious, right? Those who attack VP Sara so ferociously, those who attack Pastor Apollo Quibuloy, they certainly, unmistakably represent not the Philippine interest. Correct? You know, they are representing foreign interests. And not only foreign, but also the interest of the left. And you know, the interest of the left is a hegemonic ambition to be the global leader as fast as possible, not necessarily by peaceful means, not necessarily by election, not necessarily by the traditional uh, vehicles of gaining power, but it is enshrined in their annals that they won't hesitate in any way or form to use violence as an instrument of victory. Yes, they won't hesitate to uh, cause division in a government so that after the smoke of battle wafts and disappears, there they are standing and already holding the bag and sitting on the throne, right? Well, everybody knows that. I'm not telling something new, right? Now, uh, so these are lessons that we can learn, and I hope that you will continue to watch this meeting of the in- intelligence community that includes the FBI, CIA, uh, DNEA, or something, whatever else they have there. And they do throw in a lot of stuff uh, to awaken and to enlighten the world about the security threats and what things we can do, and also that certain things are more uh, are more urgent than other things, and that these things must be done soon. For example, the attack on cybersecurity. If your cyber system is down, you cannot even communicate, right? The Air Force cannot communicate with the Army, and the Army cannot communicate with the Navy, right? Or something is flawed or ruptured there somehow, all right? So, since there have been attempts to hack Philippine cyber system, yes, and they have done it, we don't know how many times, but there have been instances, as the public knows, then you can expect that things of that same nature and towards that trend will be done again. The question is, what is the Philippines doing, and the experts doing, and the agencies involved doing in order to first to improve cybersecurity, number two, to enhance uh, cyber mechanisms and technology, and number three, to prevent uh, the victory of cyber assaults by foreign um, elements in the country. Yes. Okay. So I hope you watch that panel or that committee hearing, because we can pick up a lot of things as pertain to not only the United States and the world, but also to the peculiar issues affecting the Philippines today. So there you are. God bless you. I'll be back on Manny Lumba TV live sometime soon. Okay? And enjoy your watching.